Hello, everyone, and welcome to 18-Minute Experts, the podcast that dives into the minds of industry leaders in the wonderful world of group benefits. I'm your host, Matthew Butters, and today I'm joined by a couple of industry thought leaders, my friends and colleagues, Michael Kettner and Jeff Bremner. We have a fun end of the year episode today where we share some insights and learnings from different books that we've read over the past couple of years. But before we jump into the conversation, a quick reminder to our listeners. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. You can also catch us at www.peoplecorporation.com/18minexperts. If you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review. Your feedback guides us as the podcast grows and evolves. All right, now, time to grab your headphones and jump in.
So how rare is this? We have a few of our hosts of 18-Minute Experts together just for a quick and friendly chat. It's the end of the year of 2025, and I thought we could just use this session, Jeff and Matthew, to chat about trends or things that we've come across over the last 12 months within our industry. I'm super curious to find out from your perspective, what's been going on for 2025?
Well, first of all, Michael, it's great to meet you in person.
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to meet you.
God, a couple of handsome gentlemen on the other end of the line here. Wow. Yeah, what's been happening in 2025, man? I don't know. I don't know about you guys. It just feels like this year went by faster than any other year that I can recall. I don't know why that was, but here we are. We're taping this on November 24th, and it's hard to believe that we're a week away from December.
Yeah.
I think the news cycle, the trends, the everything has just been keeping our heads absolutely spinning for the most part. And I think it's been a year of what's next from a lot of different perspectives. And the one thing I know that keeps me fairly centered when it comes to like, okay, how do we handle this? How do we handle that? Is conversations just like this with people who are thoughtful in their response, thoughtful in their perspective, as well as the books you read and the people you bump into. So I know that that's something that keeps me fairly centered. What is it for the two of you?
It's funny you say reading, Michael, because I think you're right. It ties into to Jeff saying how fast did this year go by? Yeah, the ever-changing news cycle, always having something in your hand where even sometimes against your will, you're getting a push notification about a news article. It's breaking news every single day, something you're reading. And I think it ties into what you said. That's the common ground. It used to be, how did the Leafs do last night? What's on the CBC? And everybody knew that. But now there's, depending on your interest, so many different news sources. If you're on Reddit, there's so many different subreddits with information, opinions that you can be accessing. It can be tough to kind of draw those connections. So I kind of like what you said about going old school, right? Speaking about some books you've read. It's something tangible that if you're not on the Kindle, right? If you have the concrete version that you can buy for somebody, have it delivered, you could share with somebody, and you can draw that commonality, even if it doesn't exist. And you bring up a book that you've read and I haven't, I can share an experience of my own, see, how interested the other party is in the same book, perhaps share my copy, right? And it draws connections and it helps deepen relationships in many respects. We do it a lot in my family, a lot of book passing. Sometimes it's me to my brother, and I find 4 years later, I go to his house and it's dog-eared 15 pages in. He hasn't proceeded with it. And other times it's a bit more active, right? Where maybe some of the women in our family are passing books in huge circles really quickly, churning and burning. But I like that way of connecting and deepening relationships. I think that's a good idea.
It's also interesting that books are one of those things that it's real, and you were talking a little bit earlier about this never-ending sort of cycle of news and, an article pops up on your phone and it's just this constant, overwhelming nature of stuff that's coming at you. But what's really, you talk a little bit about trends, Michael, one of the things that I've really noticed, we're starting to notice a lot more over the last 6 months is I don't have a clue what's real anymore. I don't have a clue what is real. AI has become so powerful in terms of the images that you really got to sort of stand back and take a look at it and say, is this truth or is this fiction? I just don't know a lot of the times. And so it is nice kind of being able to go back to books where you just know that this is real life. There's value in it.
Printed before 2023, so it's been unedited, right? And it's the truth of that. But perhaps depending if it's fiction or nonfiction, but it's the truth of that time, right? And hasn't been adjusted to fit some sort of motive or agenda of somebody else.
So Butters, what are some of the books that you will pass along to people? I'm curious on that front.
Usually for me, it's kind of when I get to a fork in the road of a conversation, right? And depending on who the person is, it's usually an inciting incident or something we're talking about that draws me back to a book that I've read, whether it was in my youth when I read a bit more frequently, when I had the extra, free time. And that could even be the difference between nonfiction and fiction, and then going from kind of like a decision-making tree from there. But more often than not, I'm in the kind of Stephen King space. Even moving a bit towards fantasy, that can be a bit more challenging to introduce to somebody. I feel there's a bit of a vulnerability there. When you reveal to somebody the type of book that you enjoy or a theme that you enjoy, they can be pretty quick to kind of turn that back on you. And instead of me saying, hey, Michael, I think you might enjoy this, you saying, holy cow, Butters, that's the kind of stuff you like. I've heard about him, right? Like, I'm not sure I want to continue this conversation. So I find a lot of the more interesting stuff to pass along in those instances are the biographies, a little bit of the nonfiction. I used to read a lot of pro wrestling documentaries because those guys had the coolest lives, travel all over the world, from Japan to Mexico to Canada to the United States, paying their dues. It's kind of usually a rags to riches story by the time they're telling their story. But some of the backstage stuff that they got into, some of the boys will be boys. It's to the time in their lives where they're willing to kind of open up, share all the secrets. And it's a pretty curious lifestyle. But most recently, the one I really enjoyed was it was kind of interview style, where somebody from the New York Times was given permission to follow Michael Eisner around for the full time that he was at Disney. It was kind of the rise and fall of Michael Eisner. And the book was called Disney War by James Stewart. And Michael Eisner kind of used the columnist, probably much to his chagrin when all was said and done, as a sounding board for ideas and thoughts, not realizing everything being written down, documented, previously agreed to. So over the course of 15, 20 years, all this information is collected by James Stewart, released along with, some common information about the business. And James was able to draw the parallels between what Michael was saying and doing and happening and what happened with the Disney company. And it was just so cool to see the insights as to, theme park performance, expansions, mergers and acquisitions relative to the musings that Michael was providing to James about, the politics from within inside Disney at that time, who he trusted, who he didn't trust. And I was able to draw some pretty cool insights just into day-to-day business that kind of made sense in our scope as well. One that always stuck out with me, it's just a small piece, but was the idea of trying to hit singles and doubles. So it's a baseball analogy, obviously, but not everything has to be a home run. And when you think of a big company like that, you think of the huge successes. Lion King, right? Movie that now is a musical, theme park, right? Everything like that. Like that stuff happens when you try to hit singles and doubles. Eventually you hit the grand slam. And I try and kind of idea every once in a while when I'm doing my business planning. It just says, doing the small stuff right can lead to the big stuff when you least expect it. So I like to recommend that book to some people as well. I think there's some really cool stuff in there.
You're right. I love those books where it gives you that insight behind the scenes type thought process. Like what were they thinking? What was the politics? What was the influence? And then to see it transpire from thought, concept, action. And then we all see the result with what
public perception, right?
The other book along that lines that I would recommend that's sort of similar is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. So Phil Knight started Nike. Right. And it's a brilliant story. He had tremendous success despite his sabotage. Like he had, he was starting a company. He was just getting barely into it, thinking about, making this a bigger thing. He had a salesperson that was truly passionate about his product. And he literally ignored the salesperson. Like he would get emails and he was just like, I'm not responding for 6 weeks. Right? And yet the company ended up being just this massive success, despite Phil Knight just I don't know if this is something I want to do. Right. And so to see some of that stuff behind the scenes, I just get a massive kick out of.
I've got that book literally sitting on my nightstand, ready to be opened up. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. And you know what, Matt, like you, I would say back in the day, again, when I had a little bit more time, biographies, absolutely my favorite thing to read. And even just, or watch, right? Like if I'm watching Netflix or something, I always gravitate towards the docuseries, the documentaries. And I've read a lot of those wrestling books that you've probably read as well.
I didn't know that about you.
Love wrestling growing up. Like all the Mick Foley stuff, I've got all of those books. But what I'd say, guys, is, you know me, my family and, 2 younger kids, not so young anymore, 13 and 11, but involved in a lot of activities. And so I spend pretty much every night either at the Ball Diamond or taking them to strength and conditioning training or some sort of practice, and haven't had a whole ton of time to read. So when I do read, I tend to try and stick more to the business books. I'll tell you about one that I found really interesting. It's one that my dad actually handed down to me, and it's called The Mind of the Strategist. And it's by a gentleman named Kenichi Ohmae, who was a Japanese management consultant and strategist that worked for McKinsey's Tokyo office. What I'd say I really loved about this one is it's not sort of your typical business book in the traditional sense. There's no checklist or framework to follow. It really talks about how strategic thinkers think, how they break down problems, how they challenge assumptions. And what really stuck with me about the book was the importance of slowing down and asking yourself whether the problem that you're solving is the actual problem. So for example, I'll give you an example that came up in this book. He talks about a Japanese car manufacturer that he consulted for, who was struggling with declining sales in a very competitive market. So naturally, their management team assumed that the problem was obvious. They needed better advertising. They needed to add more features to their vehicles. They needed more competitive pricing. All of these very surface level fixes. But when Kenichi Ohmae broke it down, he discovered the real issue wasn't demand or marketing at all. The problem was that the company was offering too many models, which created internal complexity, higher production costs, slower manufacturing response times, and difficulty stocking the right models at their dealerships. So dealers rarely had the models that the customer wanted. So the company was losing sales, but not because of poor marketing or because the product lineup was an issue. They ended up trimming the lineup, simplifying operations, and their sales ultimately improved without changing how they advertised or priced the vehicles. So really just an example that stuck with me because it really does mirror situations that come up in our business all the time. We often react to symptoms rather than to the underlying problem. So if I take this and I sort of relate it to my world and the job that I do, you guys know that, I'm responsible for the performance of GroupQuest as an example. You guys also both know that we've grown at a crazy clip over the past 6 years. With that type of growth, obviously is going to come some natural growing pains, right? So turnaround times could potentially suffer. Communication might not always be as sharp. Instinctively, it's easy to sit back and think, we need to hire more people or we need to create more processes. But when you slow it down and look at it strategically, the real issue is usually something deeper, right? Could be existing processes have unnecessary complexity, could be duplication of responsibilities, underlying technology supporting employees may not be as efficient. So I think that was just, one of the things that really stuck with me, like the whole idea of slowing down, diagnosing, and making sure that you're solving the right problem.
Even for my role, like doing direct sales, the rule that I have for myself is the quality of the question dictates the quality of the answer, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm interviewing potential prospects for buying group benefits, because I'm a group benefits advisor out here in British Columbia for People Corporation, everybody wants a better price. Everybody wants, more vision care or more dental. But getting behind the scenes with, what are the true objectives of your benefit plan, right? Because some organizations just want something that checks the box of, I offer something. And it doesn't matter if it's garbage or I offer benefits. And that's it. And others are going, no, I want to treat my employees like family. Whatever happens to them, I want to take care of them. But everyone starts with, I just want a better price. I just want better dental, right? And so it's asking those better quality questions to dictate it. No, I love that. I'm going to absolutely pick up that book.
Well, how many times have you heard we're paying too much or, our employees aren't happy with the plan, right? And a lot of times that instinct is to jump straight to the solution, which could be, we need to shop the market. We need to tweak our benefits. We need to make all of these quick changes. But like you said, sometimes it's an issue underneath that is completely different. It could be that it's the way the plan's being communicated to employees. It could be that there's been changes to the demographics of the plan and the plan design no longer fits that demographic. So going back to what you just said, so important to ask those questions, right? Really uncover what it is underneath. What's that root cause that's potentially creating the issue?
Realistically too. And I think that this podcast, it does the same thing as a book would do, or sometimes you go to a conference. What you guys are talking about is stuff that you've known for a long time. You've known that is best practices for a very long time. But what happened is you exposed, Jeff, in your instance, yourself to a book. Some people expose themselves to this podcast. Sometimes these types of media are very good at shining a light on something that you were looking for that you didn't realize was missing, right? It's a reminder of something that you used to do really well and perhaps have deviated away from doing more frequently in your current state. I find conferences are good at that too, right? If you could take that one good reminder away from the book, from the conference, from the podcast, that used to work for me. That is a best practice. I should be implementing it. And it's really relevant to something I'm working on right now, right? That's the reason I think it's so beneficial to continue to expose ourselves to the different types of media, not just the news that's curated to get a certain message across to you, something that's a bit more open space, like a book where you can draw your own conclusions from it, or an idea or a character that shines a light on what you're currently experiencing, doing, and helping guide you through that as well.
Yeah, one of my challenges is, like, I always set a massive goal for myself every year. Like, I'm going to read, 80 books this upcoming year, right? And like, I try to rip through them as fast as humanly possible. But going to what you were just saying, Butters, to like slow down and to like, no, I'm going to spend some time taking this one thing that I learned from this one book or this one conference, and I'm just going to focus on, over the next 30 days, implementing it in everything I do. One book that was really influential for me on that was a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's an amazing sales book. It reads like a fiction, but yet it's very practical in the world of sales. As an example, one of the things that I picked up around it, and I was always thought, oh, I'm really good at asking questions, or I'm really good at asking open-ended questions. But one of the things I picked up from that book was never ask a question that starts with why in a sales process. It's always better with how or what. And so as an example, it would be, your prospective client says, oh, we're not going to move forward with you. And you go, why? And instantly that puts the prospect in a very defensive position. They've now got to justify to you why. And we're adversarial. Whereas if you ask the question, oh, what went into that decision? Right now we could talk about the actual process, and now we can open up, because maybe there was some flawed thinking, or maybe that I didn't explain something, but we can now talk about the process. And so to take something out of a book like that and take a month to just really focus in on just asking how and what questions as opposed to why, I think, like Jeff said earlier, slowing down is often a better approach.
It's good practice too, Michael. 30 days, right? Because there's very few cure-alls in this world. And if you read a book, even if you don't have that persistence to apply it to, whether it's your work life, your home life, wherever you want to apply this advice or idea that you came across in a book, if you don't give it time to breathe and to see perhaps some potential positive results, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Why take that advice in the first place if you're not going to see it through or give it some time to breathe?
Guys, I read another book this year that I would say changed the way that I think about conducting meetings. And this book sort of lends itself to what you guys were just talking about, which is like, how do we take something new and apply it? And so this book was called The Surprising Power of Liberating Structures. And it was by two gentlemen, Henri Lipmanowicz and Keith McCandless. It's essentially a collection of practical ways to get groups talking, thinking, and collaborating in a different way. And so I'll give you an example. Typically, you might go into a meeting and maybe it's the same group of people every week, a recurring meeting. And it always seems to be like the same voices that are talking, right? You guys experience that at all?
Yeah, every week.
Yeah. Exactly. So this book is all sorts of different types of meeting structures that aren't your typical meeting structure. So I'll give you an example of a concept. So one of the concepts is called 1, 2, 4, all. Super basic. You would do this in probably a larger group. The first step is basically to have people reflect on a question individually. And you do that for a couple of minutes. Then the next step is you do it with a partner for a couple of minutes. And then you get into a group of 4. Those 2 partners come together into a group of 4 and you have the conversation, and then eventually you share it with the whole room, right? So the quality of thinking that you get from an approach like that is completely different. You hear ideas from people who normally don't speak up. You surface insights insights that you'd never expect. And I think avoiding those meetings again, where sort of like the first person to talk ends up setting the direction for the entire meeting. And so that's another one that I would throw out there. Is one that I read earlier this year. I actually passed it off to somebody else that we work with, but there's lots of amazing concepts in there for smaller groups as well. It's not just larger groups. It could be smaller groups. Like there's one called 15% Solutions, and basically designed for situations where you're working with one or two people and you need to move from talking about a problem to actually making progress with that problem. So instead of trying to solve everything at once, you ask each person, what's the 15% you can act on right now? And it's amazing how quickly sometimes that can shift the conversation, because people move from feeling stuck to identifying a practical step that they can take immediately to move something along.
I like that one. That's a cool one.
Any others that you guys have been reading?
I read Never Eat Alone, and it was I think it was Michael's.
Super good.
You liked it? I this is probably not going in. I hated it. I thought,
did you?
Yeah, I thought the message at first was like pretty good. It was like, it's good at networking. It's a good reminder, like taking that one thing away. It's a reminder, pick up the phone, talk to the person, go face to face, connect to other people, not just for yourself. Hopefully it'll work out for you in the future, but as a thanks to how you've gotten to where you are today, right? It's kind of like a little bit investing back into the karmic universe, but also into, your network. But beyond that, it was just a bit long. I feel like it could have been maybe like a novella or like a 1 to 2 chapter thing where it was drawn out with some personal anecdotes that were a bit of a pat on the back. But the messaging is there, right? It wouldn't be a book and be sold if it didn't have a good thesis to it. And it was, make sure you network, draw connections between others and yourselves and others despite yourself. And remember to build those personal connections, not just to revert back to the emails and things like that, not to do what's easiest.
That is generally the way that business books go. Like it's like the old Pareto rule, right? The 80-20, which was hilarious because I did read a book on the Pareto rule, and the author was like, "Oh yeah, just focus on the core, 20% that gets you the 80% result." And then he just expanded that book. Like you could just tell he didn't follow his own advice. Yeah. But yeah.
That circles back to just drawing that one thing out, right? If you get one thing, we just have to know when to stop reading the book and that we've actually captured the one thing, that nothing's hiding in the last 150 pages.
Yeah.
That's hard to do though, because you always think there's
you never know.
And sometimes it doesn't come, right?
That's a gambler's fallacy, isn't it? That might say something more about us than about
Sunk
the books.
Cost bias.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if this podcast comes out after Christmas, I know a lot of people probably got gifts they didn't really like. I implore you, return one of those gifts. Get a good book that you heard about on this podcast. Try and draw something from it, embed it into your world, and observe those results for the next 30 days. That was a really nice time chatting with Michael and Jeff. And with that, another episode of 18-Minute Experts is in the books. Remember, the insights shared here is just a small part of our overarching journey together. To stay updated on future episodes, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. When it comes to navigating the world of group benefits, knowledge is power. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered. Until next time.